Yeah, every place wants a tip. I thought that's why they got paid.
I don't like being forced into tipping, and I think you should have a choice of amount.
I would say like they started at like, you're either 12, 15, 18, and now they've gone from 15, 20 to 25.
I don't think everybody deserves a tip just because they're handing them a chocolate or they're handing them a piece of gum or something, right? But everybody wants a tip. Boo!
A new Angus Reid poll says that Canadians are tired of tip-flation, and British Columbians lead the pack. 74% are complaining about tip creep. That's 10% above national average.
We're all feeling a collective tipping fatigue. Everything in life feels like it's getting very expensive right now, and I'm seeing a lot of people say they've just decreased their dining frequency. And we got those tablets that have the auto-populated prices there. And there's not really a whole lot of room for discussion about why is there a 25% tip option when I get a cookie and a coffee.
There's one restaurant in Vancouver that's done away with tipping altogether.
These are quince and almond sweet potato tarts. We really wanted to have a really great inclusive working environment for our staff. And one of the ways we're able to do that is by getting rid of tipping. We pay our staff a very healthy salary and they get full benefits, and it just seemed like the fair way to do it.
Now I know exactly what my paycheck is going to be, and it doesn't depend on if someone's feeling generous or if someone maybe doesn't like the way I smile or something like that.
Our cost of living is incredibly high being where we are, and so having that additional cost just is a lot to people. I don't think tipping is going to go anywhere, and we didn't open this restaurant to try to change that. We did it because it worked really well for our business model and it works really well for our team, just making the best of it.
In Vancouver, British Columbia, it's Carmen Ruiz-Ilaza for Zoomer News.
Welcome back. Tipflation or tip creep is especially prevalent in restaurants. Not so long ago, 15% was standard and it was considered a good tip. Now 18% often seems to be the minimum, and it goes up from there. Richmond Station, a restaurant in the Toronto downtown core, has done away with tipping altogether. So what prompted you to take this step, Ryan?
Yeah, we've been working at this effort since 2016, pre-pandemic, to try to move the bar on tipping, and for all the reasons Saru has mentioned, it's a pretty atrocious practice and really doesn't actually benefit our industry or our employees. And what we found most recently is that customers don't like it either. And so 3 years now we've been tip free, and it's been a really great experience. Our staff like it, our customers like it, as the business owners we like it too. So those are all good things. What largely prompted us to make this change was the pandemic, actually. In 2020, we closed the restaurant. We were closed for 90 days. We let everybody off our payroll, including myself and my business partners. We had a payroll of 0. And our staff, like most Canadians, went to stand in line for sort of their version of this subsidy, which was calculated based on their insurable earnings. And what we found was that the people who were getting earning tips, there was really no value for them in that calculation because they weren't insured earnings. Those earnings were not on their paychecks. They weren't paying CPP, EI. We weren't paying WSIB and vacation pay.
They also weren't paying tax on them.
They weren't paying tax on them. So what did the government say to them? Well, I'm sorry, you're going to fall through the crack here. And so from coast to coast to coast in Canada, what we've seen is restaurant employees fall through the social safety net. It didn't catch them at all. Be curious public debate to find out whether people deserved to be caught by that social safety net, having not paid into it. What do we believe as Canadians? And what we realized as business owners is that was really no way for our staff to be treated. They needed to be paid insured wages. We needed to be paying our portion of CPP and EI on that, but employees need to be paying in their portion as well. So we decided to do away with tipping altogether, set new standards of wages for the restaurant industry that we think are nationally acceptable. And to this day, all our employees are paid more than a fair wage, and they have a career path and a way to be incented and promoted and get raises, which previously didn't exist as well, which is maybe another piece of the debate. But if you're a service-based employee relying on tips, you never get a promotion, you never get a raise, you never get anything like that. If you want to earn more money, you work Friday night or you work Saturday night. So it's nice to have some changes there.
Saru, there's quite a different work culture in the United States. Do you think there are more impediments to doing the same thing there?
No, actually, from the numbers that have just been stated, it looks like maybe America's a little bit ahead right now in terms of changing. There are thousands of restaurants that during the pandemic have switched to paying higher wages. Some have moved to what we call service charges. Some have moved to gratuity-free models. Our wages have been so low for so long that during the pandemic, millions of workers just walked off the job. 1.2 million workers left this industry during the pandemic. 60% of those who remain say they're leaving, and 80% say the only thing that would make them come back is a full livable wage. So right now we're in a moment of incredible worker power and leverage. We've tracked 5,000 restaurants across the country that have raised wages, in many cases by 1,000%, from $2 to closer to $25 an hour in Dallas, Texas, for example. So we're seeing dramatic revolutionary changes in our industry across the country. And it's frankly because workers have reached a point of saying enough is enough. I've been talking to so many reporters about this tipflation story. And yes, while I know customers are worried about tips going up, there is a bigger story here, which is a massive revolt of millions of workers saying, we're just done. We won't put up with this anymore. We need livable wages, stable wages. And restaurants are responding. At least in America, we're seeing thousands of restaurants being forced to respond. Now, it doesn't mean that we're still not seeing the tipping in the retail environments and more other environments. And that's why right now, policy is moving in 15 states across the country to raise wages and end the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers, because there's now increasingly a recognition post-pandemic that as long as we allow this one industry this exemption, every other industry is going to want this exemption. We just need to nip it in the bud and make sure everybody's paid a livable wage.
Lauren, restaurant bills are already up a lot because of inflation, supply chains, all of that. So do you detect that people who like to eat out are having some kind of hesitation about, you know, if you cut tips, then the price of the meals are going to go up even more?
You know, I think as someone who eats out a lot, I actually really like the idea of having the tip built in to the cost of the food. Because there's no awkwardness. So even though, you know, the bill might be a little bit higher, we don't have to have that tense interaction at the end, or not tense, but kind of like, oh, okay, well, how do I calculate this? How much should I tip you? Because even if the service isn't great, we always feel pressured to tip a lot. I had a friend who was at a restaurant recently, and the tip was included. It was a large party, and the server literally said to her, she's like, well, I know it says tip included, but most people do tip on top of that. Like awkward stuff, right?
That's
like,
a lot of nerve.
Yeah, I would rather just, you know, pay for it and lead up to the restaurateurs to pay living wages to their staff.
One of the other things that I've heard, and if you like dining out, fancy dining restaurants, is that the servers who work in those places who really make a lot in tips when it's a percentage on a large bill, they're not maybe really that keen about it.
They're not that keen about the tips themselves?
No, they're not that keen about giving up the tips.
Yeah, and I would say that the change is slow enough, at least in Toronto, that those opportunities will still be there for those servers who want to work in those environments. And that's true across the restaurant industry. In total, you're going to find the job in the environment that suits you well. I think what we've found is that putting an emphasis on secure wages, on insurable earnings, on higher CPP and EI calculations, that's been really beneficial. And to put a case in point, when the fourth lockdown happened at our restaurant, our employees had already been on high insured earnings for about 18 months. And every single one of those employees returned to work after the fourth lockdown.
Wow,
because
that's
their
a record.
CPP and EI calculations during that 4 or 5 week final lockdown were enough for them to pay rent and buy groceries and stuff like that. So by the end of the pandemic, we saw that the proof was in the pudding there. That worked quite well, which is lovely.
All right, don't go away. There's more after the break.